Week number 3 coming back at you, dealing with Out of the Cave. And I opened up by week number 1 sharing my story, sharing just about what this depression and anxiety is in the life of Elijah. And then last week we talked about kind of like in part 1, like what kind of got you in this cave, like what got him into this cave. And we're going to deal with that for a few weeks, like into the cave. And then after that, we're going to deal with coming out of the cave, coming out of this darkness. And so today's kind of like a part 2 of even last week. And there's 3 things I want to hit today that I believe that I shared on Sunday morning that kind of pulled Elijah into this cave. And here are the 3 things. One is I think we have a tendency to avoid working through pain. We avoid, we don't want to deal with past pain. We also want to avoid future pain, of course, but I think we don't want to work through the pain in our heart and life. And so we do a good job at avoiding and not working through, or how does that look? Sometimes that pain comes up, and even Paul talks about a thorn in his flesh. And I think sometimes we kind of get stuck because we don't want to work through, sometimes we don't know how to deal with pain, or sometimes we don't want to deal with pain. Like we know how to deal with it, we just don't want to deal with it. And sometimes we get crippled because of the inability to deal with it. And I think this is part of the reason why Elijah and a lot of us just kind of go into the cave, because it's almost like protection. If I can stay away from people, it kind of leads into that, which actually leads into isolation. Which leads into us, like one of the coping ways is if I don't reveal who I really am, if I stay a little ways away, well, then I'm playing a little bit more defense and I'm protecting myself. Or maybe you wear a mask and you isolate or you guard yourself. And so what happens is we isolate. We kind of pull farther into the cave, into the darkness. We want to be more alone. Man, even through the whole COVID thing, the isolation, sometimes for some people like the isolation, but you're going to hear in the clips coming up what isolation does to us. It's pretty hard. But there's a reason about solitary confinement in prisons. It does something to you. We're not designed to live in isolation. We're designed and created to live in a community. And so, but when we get hurt or in pain or something happens, we want to hide. And then I think this, and we begin, when we avoid, when we pull back, we go in the cave. It's like Elijah started losing his purpose. Like, why do we do this? Like, what has God called us to do? Like, our purpose. And I think once you lose your meaning and your purpose, it becomes a really hard place to be at. And doesn't the devil want to keep you isolated, not to help other people? Doesn't he just want you not to work through your own pain so you can't help other people with their pain? And doesn't he just want you to keep you so you feel like you have nothing, you have no purpose, no meaning, no anything? And that's not God at all. God for sure gives you a purpose. God gives you a destiny. God gives you meaning. God, that over and over again in Scripture. So I just want us to watch this clip from Joe and Brooke, and as they talk about this, as they kind of give some thoughts to this, and then after that, we're going to have a verse that we're going to read together and go over these questions. Welcome back. Week number 3. We're still talking about like kind of a part 2, like what brought Elijah into the cave, like what brings us in there. So we're back with Joe and Brooke talking through what. So just kind of let's continue talking about what brought not just Elijah, but what can bring us into a cave, what can bring us into this. And so just kind of share some thoughts about what can happen to each of us and what we need to
Sure.
talk through. So.
Yeah. Well, we were talking earlier about Viktor Frankl, and brilliant. And let me tell you a story, because you don't understand what he says until you hear the context of his life. He was a brilliant young psychiatrist in Vienna, Austria, coming up through the 20s and 30s, and was with Freud and initially said, no, you're wrong. He was just a young guy telling Freud, yeah, that doesn't work, which I agree, it doesn't work. And then Adler was next, like, no, that doesn't work. And he founded kind of a thought of meaning's everything. So eventually he comes to man's search for meaning is the primary motive in life. That's kind of his underwriting principle. And so he started practicing that in Vienna, and there was a really high suicide rate among teenagers in the summer because they had this test they had to pass after they graduate high school to determine their whole life. And it was too much, and high suicide rates. And he started working with meaning, and the suicide rates, some say down to zero or close to it. So doing such great work. And then the Nazis came to power, and he was Jewish, and he was taken away. His wife, who was pregnant, was taken away, his parents, and he ended up in concentration camps for nearly 4 years. And he survived. I mean, nobody should have survived. And early on, his first day in, he decided he wasn't going to be a slave. He was going to be a psychiatrist. He was going to study himself. He's going to study the other guards and the other inmates. And after 3+ years in hell, he came out with that belief, because he saw that when people came into the camps, if they had meaning, they had a chance of survival. Maybe the meaning was escaping or getting back to your family afterwards or getting vengeance, whatever it was, they had meaning. And he even saw the meaning when people were going to the gas chambers. Some people were singing hymns or Jewish songs and encouraging those as they're going to death. And he saw that meaning played out even there. So if you have meaning, you can survive, because the people that came into the camps without meaning just would die. They'd lay down and not get up, run to the fences, whatever. So for us, if we don't have meaning in life, it's too hard. But if you have meaning, anything's possible. Viktor Frankl survived with meaning. You can survive whatever you're going through with meaning. God calls us to have meaning. And he breaks it down to a few main areas. One is work and creativity, using the gifts God gave you and providing. 2 is relationships and enjoying creation, which you referenced earlier, or because this beauty God created, enjoying that is meaningful. And the last one is doing for others, which is probably the most powerful. So nobody has to live a meaningless life. Meaning is there for all of us, and it's the best thing you can do to overcome any challenge or any difficulty, and just to live really well.
Yeah, and I think to remember that even in suffering, I mean, in the Bible it says, suffering produces perseverance, character, hope, and that has just been something that sticks with me, and I think about when I'm sitting with people that are suffering, people that have experienced things that no one would even want to talk about in their lives, and knowing that in Christ, he can take that suffering and produce, all the way up to hope. That's really powerful, that it's not for nothing.
No, and then they have venue with others suffering, and they can speak truth to them like no one else can, which is great meaning. So that's that serving others, which is so powerful.
And I love what you said about hope, having that hope. And I think a lot of people who kind of go down into that cave lose that hope.
Yeah.
And they lose that meaning. Like, why? So it makes you wonder, like, when you, Frankl was saying, like, when you have that meaning of work and relationships and, what's around you, when you realize, not that you're even losing that, but when you feel like you're losing it, then that's when you begin to feel like you're losing your meaning and your purpose.
Right.
Yeah.
Living for pleasure is not enough.
Yeah.
It's empty, and it'll leave you wanting, but living with meaning won't.
Right.
So good. It's amazing how so many of that, when you say the word meaning, does it coincide with the word purpose?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interchangeable.
Interchangeable.
Purpose, meaning. Yeah.
Yeah. So living with a purpose. And I think, look at Jesus, what he was just telling his disciples. Oh, he wasn't just giving them a reason why they're here, but even a reason after he left, he was giving them a meaning and a purpose to live out. And so a call to all Christians, but especially to his disciples, saying, this is going to change, but this still stays the same, you know?
Well, and that's the power of living for God, right?
Yeah.
Is we are salt and light. So no matter our experiences, it can have meaning. It can bring light to something. It can help to heal something in another person or ourselves.
And Frankl talks about even having meaning and dying with meaning. So we have that till our last breath.
Yeah.
We can live a meaningful life.
Which kind of goes on to what I want to, one of the topics too of talking about this. Look at Viktor Frankl. I mean, he really wasn't suffering alone. He got, with other people. Let's talk through just isolation and loneliness. Because usually when you go down this area of like when Elijah went in a cave, that was isolation.
Yeah.
So like, let's just talk through that as just give us your thoughts about how unhealthy that could be, in living that way. So.
I think sometimes it starts out as like a self-care, You think of somebody, even him, like you're so sore, you're so much in pain that you need to just kind of be away from anything that could touch you. But as it goes on, you make excuses about it, you get stuck in it. At some point it's kind of your life. You don't have anybody you're connected to, and now you don't know how to get out of it. And that it's a very difficult thing when people are in that state.
I like to look at the way God created us to live originally. And so Adam wasn't alone. And it wasn't good to be alone. And if we're isolated, we're destroying ourselves because we're not created for that. If you wanted to torture somebody, you put them on isolation.
Right.
That's the ultimate punishment in a prison, right? Isolating, because it's not how we're created to live. And we always can find meaningful relationships. And C.S. Lewis is really good because he breaks it down in the 4 loves to 4 areas. So one, we can have affection. That's just that general care, esteem for those around us. But friendships, he defines as people looking towards the same direction or having the same goals, the same interests. So him and the Inklings, they had the same interests. They met every week for years. So you can find friendships and relationships by finding similar interests. The other one is eros, or romantic love. And you can explain that one-on-one. And then the last one is serving others, which I think is the most powerful. Again, I keep going back to that. And if you really want to find friendships and relationships, go serve, because then you have that shared meaning. And even when I work with couples that aren't doing well, one of the homework assignments I'll give is go find a way to volunteer together. Because when you do that, you get a dopamine pop, which is a reward chemical. And if you do that together, then it pulls you together. So
I think you see your partner in a different way too then, through other people's eyes.
Yeah, really powerful. So whenever you can do something for others without expecting anything in return, you'll always benefit.
It's a great plug for serving a church. Honestly, I've told many people through the years, if they're having marriage issues or they're dealing with something, I always say, find place to serve, not just by yourself, serve together.
Serve together.
Serve together, do something together. And because when you can look past, you're not ignoring yourself, but it's almost like you're making your world bigger. It's not just, your world. It's like a bigger mindset. You talking to somebody else about what's going on, or you're,
Right.
So.
Well, and maybe that goes back to the isolation thing.
Yeah.
You're like shutting yourself in, you're closing yourself off. And when you look out
which is really good,
into the world, into other people, it kind of takes you out of that space.
That's so good.
God created us and calls us to serve. So let's go with his plan.
It's a good plan.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, guys. That's awesome. Good stuff.